Good afternoon and good morning. Welcome to our second day of the MIT Fundación Ramón Areces Symposium, The Power of Nano, featuring insights and perspectives from MIT's leading faculty members. My name is Carl Koster. I'm the Executive Director of MIT's Office of Corporate Relations, which includes our Industrial Liaison Program and MIT Startup Exchange. This program is brought to you by Fundación Ramón Areces and the MIT Industrial Liaison Program. For corporations, membership in MIT's Industrial Liaison Program enables executives to join the process of discovery at MIT. By becoming part of the discourse on campus, executives are able to learn relevant and breakthrough discoveries so they can synthesize new directions, make better decisions, develop new capabilities, platforms, and business models, and develop their next generation of professionals and executive leadership. MIT faculty members, research scientists, and students are building the future, not just talking about it or analyzing or critiquing what others are doing. Consequently, they know much more about the future than any other source of knowledge and information. The MIT Industrial Liaison Program helps executives from over 230 corporations stay widely informed and thinking straight in a world of great uncertainty, profound ambiguity, and intense competition. I hope you'll enjoy today the lecture of Professor Vladimir Bulovic, the founding director of MIT.nano. My colleague, Eduardo Garrido, will now introduce him. Eduardo, over to you. Gracias.
Gracias, Carl. Es un placer para mí presentaros a Vladimir Bulovic, que va a hablar de En los albores de la era nano, MIT.nano y el futuro del descubrimiento. Vladimir Bulovic es profesor de tecnologías emergentes en el MIT. Es director fundador del MIT.nano, el nuevo edificio de nanofabricación, de nanocaracterización y de desarrollo de prototipos de 200.000 pies cuadrados del MIT. Dirige el laboratorio de electrónica orgánica y nanoestructurada del MIT. Es además autor de más de 250 artículos de investigación que han sido citados más de 50.000 veces y reconocidos como el 1% de los más citados en la Web of Science. Es inventor de más de 100 patentes estadounidenses en las áreas de diodos emisores de luz, láseres, energía fotovoltaica, fotodetectores, sensores químicos, memorias programables y máquinas microelectrónicas, la mayoría de las cuales han sido licenciadas. Cofundó 3 empresas que emplean a más de 350 personas. Ubiquitous Energy, que desarrolla tecnologías solares nanoestructuradas, Cativa, que desarrolla productos electrónicos impresos, y Q-Division, que produce componentes optoelectrónicos de puntos cuánticos. El profesor Bulovic fue primer decano asociado de innovación de la Escuela de Ingeniería del MIT, codirector inaugural de la iniciativa de innovación del MIT entre los años 2013 y 2018. Y además, por su pasión por la educación, el profesor Bulovic ha sido reconocido con la McVicar Fellowship, el más alto honor del MIT en el ámbito de la enseñanza. Se graduó en Ingeniería Eléctrica y obtuvo su doctorado en la misma disciplina en la Universidad de Stanford. Vladimir, over to you.
It's an honor to join you today. My goal of today is to show you nanoscale, to show you how everywhere you look, anything you touch, anything you taste or see happens to fundamentally be built from nanoscale up. And it turns out that we live in an age where finally we have the tools and capabilities to control the nanoscale, build it from ground up, one atom at a time or more, in order to indeed build a better world. At MIT, our work on nanoscale has been centered around one very large facility we recently opened. The entire campus abundantly works on nanoscale, but the tools inside this one facility we call MIT.nano have the capability to transform the world. They're there to enable our researchers and the world at large to benefit from our discoveries and discoveries of our partners. Engagement is the key to understanding how to make the best solutions for the most needed challenges. I'll describe MIT.nano in just a moment. I will point you, though, one thing that is right now pressing on the world, and that indeed is a nanoscale phenomenon. And that is indeed the presence of the COVID-19 virus. COVID virus is 18 nanometers in diameter. If you're looking at ways of addressing it, you might look deeper into it and recognize that it's the strands of DNA inside that virus that are only 2 nanometers in width and maybe 10 nanometers in size that will need to be addressed. Indeed, the masks we wear, N95s, are there to stop nanoscale items from spreading and reaching our noses, our mouths. And indeed, if we are going to come up with a vaccine, the medicine itself will be on the scale of a nanometer or a few nanometers at most. The nanoscale is the key to making these advancements, to making the advancements of addressing the present pandemic, but also making the advancements that the world needs to be able to build the better world we expect, to build the better world we need, to come up with better energy solutions, medical solutions, better built materials. MIT.nano was designed as a space that is easy to reach by anyone across MIT. As a matter of fact, the very first decision we made is to position the building right in the center of the MIT campus. This image shows you a part of the central MIT campus with all the buildings interconnected and MIT.nano sitting right in the middle of them. The other thing we ensured is that no professor has an office inside MIT.nano. Because professors of today might be extremely innovative, but they'll become old professors. Just give them 5 to 10 years. And the new generations of professors and students should be the ones to shine. So the way to ensure the building never gets old, we made sure no single research group lives inside the building. Rather, the tools and facilities of MIT.nano are used by anyone as needed. I'll show you, for most of my talk, what people would do inside the space. But I would highlight, as I look at this picture, 1, 2, and 3 very important elements that define the ability to invent the next set of nanotechnology, or actually any set of new ideas. Science of innovation, which is the process of starting with the invention and then growing it to the place where you can give the invention to a million people. The journey of innovation studied tells us that to launch the next set of innovations, you can do it much more effectively if you can, 1, bring together people of different disciplines to hence get different perspectives. To ensure that those perspectives can be shared, those people need to encounter each other. And what that means is giving them spaces that seamlessly they can step from one discipline to the next. MIT campus indeed provides that. All of our buildings are connected, and hence one discipline starting and the other one stopping is not obvious to us. We blend all of our disciplines in order to recognize the opportunity of cross-disciplinary research as a way of advancing the next set of great ideas. Lastly, the third point, although you have different people of different disciplines, although you have brought them together, they might not talk to each other. So build an environment that allows for engagement. Build an environment that is so exciting that you find yourself wanting to share with your colleagues your latest set of ideas. MIT campus does exactly that. The vibrancy of our campus comes from our students. They are the key to our vitality. They are the key inventors. They're the key collaborators with the guidance of the professors. Indeed, I would point to our graduate students as being the most valuable human resource of MIT campus. And I would look towards the structure and the culture that the faculty are able to maintain that indeed enable us to bring together the next set of great ideas. We were lucky to have a campus that was built this way. And MIT.nano as a facility was inserted right in the middle of it to continue that legacy of shared experience to lead to next great set of innovations. MIT.nano as a space has in it clean rooms in the heart of the building. 4 floors actually are occupied by those clean rooms. Top level of every clean room is a fan deck that cleans the air, and the lower level is where the humans walk. And then underneath the clean rooms in the basement, is our imaging and metrology facility, the place that allows us to see the nanoscale and find out have our made discoveries or nature-built objects, how are they truly put together? So we can then make the next leap of the next discovery that's needed. All of these great academic insights are particularly valuable if they can be given to the world outside, and that is what the top floor of MIT.nano focuses on. Prototyping, synthesis, making a way of taking those discoveries from the clean rooms, from the imaging suites, from other labs of Nano, and actually giving them in a form of handheld objects. Because it's those handheld objects that will allow startups to raise the funds and consequently scale up the idea from the first invention to a million people benefiting from it or more. The mission as such for MIT.nano is to build a better world, very simply stated, by fostering education, innovation, and research on nanoscale phenomena, materials, devices, and systems, with all the tools inside the space being shared to enable the entire 1,000+ set of users to benefit. And when I say users, I mean researchers of MIT, our colleagues from other institutions, our colleagues from industry that work very hard to maintain the operation of MIT.nano together with us, and as such, a community of researchers to build that better world. One question that I often get asked is, well, where will nanotechnology truly benefit the humanity? And the easiest way to answer that question is to look at the activities of the youngest of our professors. After 6 years of being at MIT, a professor might get tenure, which means they'll be there for life afterwards. And it's those individuals who were recently tenured that will define next 30 to 40 years of MIT's discovery. So what are they working on? Because that is what the future will be. In the School of Science, 51% of them work on nanoscale phenomena and build nanoscale structures and devices. In the School of Engineering, 2/3, 67% of all of our recently tenured engineers utilize nanoscale to make their discoveries. And hence, medicine and life sciences will be affected by the nanoscale world. So will the discoveries of new energy systems, computing and information systems, manufacturing, materials and structures, quantum science and technology. All of these will indeed be advanced through the nanoscale discoveries. But most important above all of that is education. We keep in mind that as an organization, our job as MIT is to make two products: knowledge in all the fields that are listed here, but much more importantly, train the people that will step out of MIT and hopefully make a difference for the world. Our best product is our people and their unbound enthusiasm to make the next set of discoveries. What they gain at MIT is the recognition of what could be possible if you're surrounded by similarly minded individuals, similarly driven, with a similar sense of wanting to make a tremendous difference to the world. That is what our job is. And MIT.nano supports that educational endeavor through that hands-on experience that we're able to provide. Now, what I want to do is, in the next set of slides, actually show you some nanoscale technologies, ones that you might have not necessarily easily thought of. It's easy to think of nanoscale affecting quantum science and technology. Clearly, quantum is down on the nanoscale. Quantum computing will benefit from it, and so clearly has computing as we know it. Well, those topics we can cover, but I know that you will have heard about them already from my colleagues from MIT. So instead, let me focus on some other topics you might have not thought of as being nanoscale. Here is an example. These are vials that contain nanoparticles of gold and silver. Those nanoparticles are suspended in a liquid, and hence why the whole vial is glowing when white light is shining on it. Gold and silver don't look like gold and silver when they are made as nanoscale objects. And as a result, we have found that there are many new opportunities. One can utilize these nanoscale gold and silver. Those opportunities in Professor Lee Gerke's labs, I'll show you in a moment how they were translated to new discoveries. But the discoveries of nanoscale gold and silver has been present from the Middle Ages. Here is an example of what nanotechnologists of the Middle Ages used gold and silver for. They would take molten glass, introduce gold and silver in it. Gold and silver would form colloidal nanoparticles. Those colloidal nanoparticles would stay inside the glass. And if you cast that glass as a flat pane, you just made stained glass windows. The red and yellow hues in those stained glass windows come from nanoparticles of gold. The blue and green hues come from nanoparticles of silver. Nanotechnology has been around us for many, many years, and we use it every day in our experience. That hence allows us to think about how to take the next steps. In Lee Gerke's labs, silver nanoparticles, same ones that are embedded inside those panes of glass, can be used to accelerate detection of viruses, such as Ebola, West Nile, dengue, Zika, and now, as of early this year, COVID-19. A very straightforward diagnostic can be made that is affected by the nanoscale of those nanoparticles. The color of nanoparticles depends on their size. If I change the size of the gold nanoparticle, reflection of the color will change the hue. Result of that is, if I can take a nanoparticle of silver, let's say, put on it a nanometer thick layer of receptive material, some sort of strand of DNA that will be able to link itself to the DNA from the virus. If there is a virus in the drop of your blood, you can break that virus down, introduce the broken up parts of it on a piece of paper. Use the piece of paper as a microcapillary where the serum from your blood spreads, reaches the nanoparticles. If there is the DNA you're targeting, the DNA will attach itself to the nanoparticle. The nanoparticle, as a result, will be nanoparticle together with a strand of DNA from the virus. This object, combined object, is bigger than a silver nanoparticle by itself, will cause additional delocalization of electrons that will cause the color of the nanoparticle to change. And as a result, the nanoparticles can be used as detectors of the presence of viruses inside your blood, using a piece of paper and a coated piece of paper with those nanoparticles. Very similar to the pregnancy tests. You can get, in a matter of tens of minutes, a diagnostic that is easily transportable to anywhere in the world. A big challenge, for example, for Zika or West Nile is recognizing that in remote parts of the world, those viruses might also be. To take a blood from someone who lives in a remote part of the world might take a couple of days, one to walk to the village, one to draw the blood, walk it back to the neighboring town to analyze the blood and then recognize the result, and then walk back to tell the villagers that they indeed have an infection among them. That's multiple days of waiting to get the result. With Gerke lab results, diagnostics, the results could be obtained in 20 minutes time, using a drop of blood from your finger. That is a very different way of thinking about how to deliver that diagnostics, and entirely enabled by the nanoscale. Indeed, if you look at any drug or vitamin, you'll find it is actually nanoscale in size. And for a yardstick here, for just to measure meter stick, to tell us how big objects are, I draw the benzene molecule. You can draw aspirin or ibuprofen or vitamins A, B, C, and D, and you will find that the size of those molecules of aspirin or ibuprofen are maybe a few times bigger than benzene, few times 0.3 nanometers, meaning just about a nanometer in size. Besides those good drugs, there are also those not quite good drugs. Cocaine, LSD, similarly, are nanometer size objects. Nanoscale affects us very deeply, and controlling it, designing it to make a better way of understanding how we operate, indeed was the key in advancing the drug discovery. The DNA itself is very, very small. And it took about 84 years to discover how DNA looks. Indeed, it was suggested back in the late 1800s that there might be something inside our cells that defines who we are. And then through the works all the way, to the 1950s, when the first X-ray diffraction image, the one I show on the upper left, came about, that X-ray diffraction image was very unusual. It showed a cross pattern of periodic dots, never previously seen quite like that, coming from biological matter. And indeed, that led to the suggestion by Watson and Crick, that indeed inspired by Franklin's work, that this might be a twisted molecule inside our cells. Now, you can imagine back in the 1950s when this was suggested, people would say, well, it could be, but it could be many other things. Indeed, let's go and check it. Let's go find out what it might be. Let me dispute your theory the best I can. And, a decade maybe later, people finally had an appreciation that, yes, this looks like a twisted molecule inside every one of our cells. So many years of work by many, many people to come up with the conclusion that DNA is a twisted molecule inside our cells. Today, you can tell a graduate student, why don't you break open the cell, extract the DNA, put it on a conductive substrate, and put it in a scanning tunneling microscope, and show me the image. It takes about 2 hours to go through those steps, and you would obtain an image that you see on the right. Take that image multiple times, in a matter of a week, you'll have an absolute conclusion that there is a twisted molecule inside your cells. Work by one student over a week is equated to the decades of work that preceded him or her, without knowledge of have we really reached the right conclusion. The reason why the students can now see the world in such exquisite detail is the sets of tools that just became available over the last couple of decades. And it is these tools that allow us to say that we are at the dawn of the nano age. We're just about to make many, many new discoveries, as we can finally take a look into how the world is truly put together, down on the scale of atoms. This instrument, cryogenic transition electron microscope, is in the basement of MIT.nano. It allows you to understand structural biology, see the shapes of the objects that construct us, and from there infer how to build a better medicine. A medicine needs to know the sequence of your DNA, but also needs to know the twist in your DNA, the shape of the protein that's holding it, and hence serve almost like a key in a lock in order to unlock the solutions to the medical challenges we are right now facing. Seeing the nanoscale is the key. And indeed, at MIT.nano, we are exploring the nanoscale of solutions that might affect COVID-19. Other objects that are very small and that you experience every day are scents, things that make your cup of tea smell like tea, what makes orange juice smell like orange juice. There is a set of molecules that would leave your cup of tea, spread in the air, and eventually reach your nose. And that set of objects look like this. They're molecules about 1 nanometer in size. I draw them all here for mint, for raspberries, for lemon, for almonds, for bananas, grapes, and roses. Every one of those molecules, notice, is a very small object. Very small object that is released by lemon or orange, hence generating the scent. If these objects are 1 nanometer in size, that also implies that my ability to sense is designed to experience nanoscale sensations. Indeed, your nose is filled with nanoscale detectors that can differentiate between these different nanoscale objects. Look at the molecule of lemon and orange I drew here. Actually, they are exactly the same molecule. I just took the picture and rotated it. Why do they then smell different? Well, because this molecule is twisted one way And this molecule is twisted exactly in the opposite way, so-called concave and convex. And that concave and convex twist of the molecule will cause the smell to be ever so slightly different. And your nose can recognize that. Your nanoscale detectors can recognize the nanoscale property of the world around you. You're designed to experience nanoscale. And the smell, just like we smell, you can try to recognize is an opportunity to better the world. So here is one example. This is an example of a piece of paper coated with gold. And then between the electrodes of gold are carbon nanotubes that are painted. You can think of it as with a paintbrush. These carbon nanotubes are functionalized with surface molecules that will attach to a molecule of ethylene. Ethylene is a plant hormone. It's emitted anytime that plants are ripening, when bananas turn from green to yellow, when apples turn from green to red, and so on. The ethylene is a trigger. It's a messenger. It informs the other plants around the one ripening one that it is time to ripen. And if you want to make your bananas turn yellow quicker, put them inside a paper bag, because paper bag is made of wooden objects that emit ethylene. That ethylene is what informs your bananas it's time to change your color and become ripe. If you can measure the presence of ethylene, and these carbon nanotubes will allow the ethylene to attach to them, well, the carbon nanotubes, when the ethylene is attached, change their conductance, change how easy it is to pass charge through that carbon nanotube. As a matter of fact, you can then say changing conductance is a signature that ethylene is present in the air. And then this piece of paper becomes a chemical sensor for ethylene. If you had this ethylene detector inside an apple orchard storage room, the place where all the apples are being stored after they're being harvested, you would be able to know which crate of apples is more ripe than the other crates, and hence should be sold ahead of the other crates before it starts rotting. As a matter of fact, today in the United States, about 15% of all of the fruits and vegetables never get sold because they rot in warehouses. Recognizing that would be a tremendous financial value. And the little startup, C2 Cents, that is indicated down on the lower right, is a company commercializing that idea and a number of others. Can you measure ammonia in the pigsties so that your animals live a healthier life? Can you detect other analytes in the air, other chemicals that might be found? This is a work of Professor Tim Svager at MIT, a chemist, an extraordinary researcher who has an ability to truly delicately engineer the nanoscale molecules and recognize their presence through a series of sensing technologies. This is one where the carbon nanotubes change conductance. Here's another one, an earlier one, his work made. The picture on the lower left is a picture of a polymer that glows beautifully green. But in the presence of analyte TNT, an explosive found on a battlefield, the film will stop glowing. The diminishment in the glow will happen anytime something strongly electronegative attaches itself to the film. In a battlefield, in nature, the only source of strongly electronegative materials is the mines and the explosives. If you find the diminishment in the brightness of this film, it indicates that there is a scent of explosive in the air, and you should be very careful. Indeed, US military has utilized this technology to determine the presence of improvised explosive devices, and indeed, presence of buried landmines. Sensing, again, the nanoscale, can be tremendously valuable for the world. A place where you would take that film of Tim Svager's lab to make it into a film, the molecules of his lab to make it into a film would be, for example, this lab inside MIT.nano. I showed you before the cryo-electron microscope. Here's another smaller lab that actually manages molecular thin films and can allow you to go ahead and make the next generation of lighting technologies, solar technologies, and so on. My goal is to show you different technologies, and here's a very simple one. This is a pickle that has been electrified using electrodes. The electrodes apply about 100, 110 volts, and as a result, generate the glow of the sodium atoms inside that pickle. You can take that pickle and slice it very, very thin, and you can drop the voltage of excitation from 100 volts to maybe 3 to 5 volts. Now you can then consider making a TV screen out of those molecules, or in this case, sodium atoms, that are glowing. Molecules as nanoscale objects have been introduced in the technology of organic light emitting devices. And here is a cell phone screen that utilizes organic LEDs as the displays. All that we are doing in this display is taking different types of molecules, the red, the green, and the blue glowing ones, pixelating them next to each other and electrically exciting whichever ones you wish to generate an image that you see. The entire device is about 100 nanometers of active layers with about 10 nanometers of really active layers right in the middle, the ones that glow. And then add to that another couple of 100 nanometers of electrodes. And you have made a device that's not quite a half a micron thick, and yet generates the glow that is visibly observable, generates a beautiful new TV technology. Indeed, OLEDs have a tremendous number of visual advantages and operational advantages. They give you high contrast between lit device and the dark device. That's known as a high contrast ratio. They're super thin, they're ultra fast, they're pure color. You can curve them because they're so thin. They don't experience any stress and strain during the curvature. Result of that is that you can make an amazingly powerful technology to replace the $120 billion industry of displays. Except there is no foundry to make OLEDs, or at least, let me tell you, a decade ago, there was no foundry. Now there is. The recognition at MIT and other places is that there was no way to make OLEDs into functional large area devices. What was required is large area nanofabrication. And we provided it by engaging students of MIT, asking them what would be a great research topic to work on, them recognizing that this would be a transformational topic, not just because OLEDs and QLEDs can make you TVs that consume much less energy than the plasma LCDs or rear projection TVs of the time, but also to generate light bulbs in general, as lighting consumes about 20% of the world electricity. It would be a tremendously valuable opportunity to come up with a more energy efficient light bulb that OLEDs can provide you. Notice on the bottom, I also indicate QD LEDs. This stands for quantum dot light emitting devices. I will touch upon them just shortly after I tell you a little bit more about OLEDs. Recognizing that the large area nanofabrication technique did not exist for OLEDs, we at MIT, about, maybe 12 years ago, started designing the next opportunity for actually fabricating OLEDs. We made a printer that can print 1 pixel at a time every few seconds and can give you an active device as a result. That printer was scaled by a startup company called Cativa, started by MIT students taking MIT technology, MIT supporting them as they take the MIT technology to allow them to scale this idea. And here we have a human standing next to a small version of their printer. This is one of their early versions, and that particular tool was provided to the industry in December 2014. That particular tool needed to prove itself, and a couple of years of testing proved that this is a very viable way of producing encapsulation layers and pixelated layers of OLEDs. Here's a printer in action. It's a 1,000 nozzle printhead that is moving sideways as the piece of glass is slid in the other direction. The piece of glass can be, in this case, 2 by 2 meters in size, and the whole printing sequence will take about 90 seconds from the beginning to the end. Actually 75 seconds in this particular version, because we wanted to leave 15 seconds to dry our printed structure. The deposited material would be deposited with 5 micron accuracy over 2 meter substrate. The pixels themselves would be about 25 microns in size. The thickness of the deposited layers would be on the scales of 10 or tens of nanometers in thickness. This is a remarkable achievement by our students. You have chosen to use a substrate that is much bigger than today's silicon wafers, 2 by 2 meters in size to be exact. We are putting down films on the accuracy of 10 nanometers rather than microns that some of the silicon devices require. And indeed, the yield, the functional operation of every device we make needs to be exactly the same, because your eye can pick out 1 out of 4 million bad pixels on your TV screen. Your yields need to exceed 99%. It needs to be 99.9 and keep counting. If you're going to make technology that people can then use and sell the TVs you're going to make out of these. So the challenge is immense to make it a tool like this. And indeed, industry has never done it at the scale and using semiconductors that are organic, not conventional. So the tool was eventually delivered. And by 2016, over 100 million phones were encapsulated in that year. Now it's over 100 million cell phones are encapsulated every month, if not more, using this technology. If you have an OLED screen on your cell phone, it is very likely that a tool like this indeed built it, tool by Cativa, by a small startup that grew into a dominant tool provider for a very large industry. Here is Jianglong Chen, Jerry, one of my former students, who is standing in front of a wall. The red line on the wall shows you the size of the biggest piece of glass Cativa can manage, 2.9 by 3.3 meter piece of glass, so-called Generation 10. This Generation 10 glass can put on many large area displays or many cell phone size displays. And again, all of them need to work perfectly. With a tool like this, you can also imagine what the future will bring. And Cativa has indeed done that by looking at what would be opportunities with their new tool sets. And they imagined a device like this, a cell phone that can open up and in the process convert a cell phone screen into an iPad-like screen, a tablet, giving you hence visual dispersion that would be desired in order to analyze larger data sets, for example, on your cell phone. Now, this particular technology became real last year. You might have seen clamshell Samsung phones that open up to OLED screens and give you a seamless surface. That technology was further perfected this year. So technology was first introduced as a technology by a commercial vendor last year, a year ago. This video was designed, built, imagined by Cativa about 7-8 years ago, as they knew what the future will bring. And that is very typical for MIT and MIT students. Our goal is to, through our work, be able to imagine where the future is heading, and through it, be able to design a better future for all of us. Here's another technology that was born in MIT labs and perfected there. A work of Professor Munjiba Wendi, a remarkable chemist who studies colloidal nanoparticles and can perfect them to make them glow exquisitely with high efficiency and any color of the rainbow. His work and the work of his colleagues has led to the abilities to make nanoparticles that are little objects, maybe 2, maybe 12 nanometers in diameter, and by tuning their size to change their color, and through that, be able to precisely provide the color quality needed for any device technology you aim for. I am an electrical engineer. I spend my time asking questions on how to utilize these novel materials to make structures that have never been done before. We have shown you some OLED work. We've realized that with these quantum dots, we might be able to make a new type of lighting technology. And so we tried this. The incandescent light bulbs look beautiful, but they're not very efficient. You know that because when you touch an incandescent light bulb, they are very hot and burn your fingers. LED lights do a lot better, much more efficient. But the typical challenge with LED lights is their color quality. They start with a blue LED, and that the blue LED typically takes a yellow-green phosphor to generate a white light. The yellow-green phosphor is missing orange and red hues, and hence your bananas, illuminated by white LEDs, do not look very appetizing. They don't look very ripe. If you add to the cool white LED a layer of quantum dots, we're going to call it QD optic. That layer of quantum dots can convert some of the excess blue light and give you the extra orange and red hues. Result of it is that your fruit bowl will look appetizing, and indeed you'll recover the color quality of an incandescent light bulb, but using only about 1/5 of the energy of an incandescent light bulb. A very energy efficient technology that indeed led to, back in 2009, 2010, Hue Division, a little startup that worked on this technology, taking the ideas from MIT and growing them to build the technology into commercially available light bulbs. In 2009, 2010, a typical light bulb that was made of LEDs would cost about $40. And that's because they would last 10 years. So you might be willing to spend more money on them. The profit margin that Hue Division would expect out of this particular cut would be maybe 5% of the profits coming their way. Well, 5% would be a significant amount of money, considering it doesn't take very much money to build a light bulb. And that's a good business to be in. However, as the LED technology progressed, the light bulbs don't cost $40 anymore. Now they cost $1, maybe even less. And as a result, 5% of that profit margin is very, very small to build a sustainable business on. Hue Division needed to identify another light bulb technology that in order to survive as a company. And they realized that every liquid crystal display has a light bulb behind it, a light bulb that generates white light that then can be color filtered and liquid crystal modulated to generate the image. That light bulb that sits behind every liquid crystal display could be made of quantum dots, and if done that way, can generate better color quality and better efficiency of your display. The technology was invented in roughly around 2009, 2010, just as we were recognizing that the light bulbs cannot be really scaled in a future business. And by 2013, Sony introduced the technology inside their TVs. The technology was displayed in January 2013 as and had won the best TV in the Consumer Electronics Show of 2013. Technology was hence recognized and now is present by many companies. Following Sony, companies like TCL, Hisense adapted it, and by 2016, Samsung acquired Hue Division and utilized our brand name, QLED, to launch their line of products, now known as QLED TVs. QLED TVs are the flagship flagship product of Samsung when it comes to the display technologies. And indeed, it's enabled entirely by the imagination of students at MIT. Let me show you a counterexample to light emission, and that is light absorption. And I'll start by simply pointing to you that sun provides us a lot of light that we can absorb and generate, as you'll see through the use of nanotechnology, very unusual generation of new solar technologies. So LEDs take electricity in and give you light out. Solar cells take light in and give you electricity out. How much electricity, how much power can we generate? Well, that little square in the upper left is the power used just about now. This is take the energy of the world spent in a year and divide it by the number of hours, and that's how your seconds, and that's how you'll find that on average we consume about 16 terawatts of power. So sun provides us about 10,000 times more power than that. The only challenge, right, with sun's light is that if we would like to collect all of that light, we would need to collect it in a course of, let's say, an hour, because in a matter of a single hour, sun gives us enough power to run the planet for a year. The challenge with that, of course, is that we need to coat half of planet Earth with solar cells and collect during that hour all the sunlight the planet gives us. That's not really a scalable process. As a result, one, we recognize our solar cells are not 100% efficient. Let's make them 20% efficient. So, all right, we'll have to degrade the number of hours to 5 hours rather than 1 hour. Oh, well, let's not cover the entire planet with solar cells. Let's cover maybe 1% of the planet with solar cells. So that's about 500 hours of sunlight that you would need. We certainly have that number of hours of good sunlight in a course of a year. So with about 1%, roughly speaking, of the planet covered with solar cells, we can provide all the energy we need to run the planet. Today's solution is solar technology made of silicon, installed either in residential systems, commercial rooftop systems, or large area utility systems. Notice these are silicon panels mounted onto glass panels and then mounted onto a surface area that will hold them. About 2/3 of the cost of a silicon solar installation is actually in the installation itself, because often it necessitates either reinforcement of the roof or building of an aluminum and concrete structure to hold the next set of panels in the utility system on the left. Silicon is an indirect bandgap semiconductor. It doesn't absorb light as efficiently as these nanostructured materials we use. Nanostructured materials like molecules, polymers, latest ones called perovskites are particularly exciting as they provide high efficiency and simplicity of manufacturability. In each case, if you use a nanostructured material, you really need only a micron or less of the material compared to a silicon cell that may be 150 micron thick wafer. Because silicon wafer is so thick, 1.5 times the thickness of human hair, that is what makes it also brittle. And as a result, we mount it onto 3 to 4 millimeter thick pieces of glass. Hence why silicon module 1 by 2 meters in size might weigh 50 pounds, 25 kilos. If instead we use nanostructured films, we can make them into thin, flexible rolls of material, and they would weigh significantly less than a silicon panel, maybe only 0.5 kilo for that same area of 1 by 2 meters in size. This gives us an opportunity to recognize that to transform solar, generating lightweight solar cells could be the new transformational technology. How do we make them? Well, here's an example. This is a video of perovskite thin film being inkjet printed, or pardon me, slot die printed on this particular piece of plastic. It starts as a transparent liquid that then solidifies into a dark solid that will be very efficient absorbing light. Solutions of these materials we perfected. We can coat now over 10 minutes, 100-meter long roll of this material, if that's what we wish to do. And we have shown that using these kinds of perovskite materials, you can achieve world records. Earlier this year, we held a world record of 25.2% power conversion efficiency that matches, nearly matches the best silicon performance and certainly exceeds what commercial silicon right now provides. The record has been slightly improved this summer by our colleagues from Korea that now I believe is 25.6%. However, the goal of this work was not to set new records. The goal of this work is to make large area, simple ways of making solar cells. Here is a fraction of that unrolled solar cell sitting in the corridors of MIT.nano with a team of students that indeed perfected the work. And the roll on the right is the very same roll, compact, easy to pick up, easy to deploy. Plastic that we use as a substrate to take our material is maybe 50, 150 microns in thickness. It's still too thick compared to the actual cell that's only 1 micron or 0.5 micron in thickness. So can you put such cell on an even lighter substrate than plastic? Paper would be an obvious example. And the answer is you can. This is an image of one of the cells we deposited on paper. The reason why we think of this is to ask, deployment can dramatically be improved if I don't have to put a rack on the roof and hence silicon panels on top of it. Rather, my installation of the cell could come in the form of a carpet I can simply stapled to the roof or nailed to the roof. And if I want to unroll it during the day when I'm not at my home, or roll it back up at night to see through my windows, I can certainly do that. Through this, you should be able to reduce the cost of installed solar cells dramatically, maybe by a factor of 3. The best price points of today's solar come out to electricity that costs about 3 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour. Reduce that number by a factor of 3, and it is conceivable that we will reach 1 cent a kilowatt hour or even lower as the price point of the future solar installations and electricity coming out of them. In that case, electricity would be provided on any surface you touch, as it would be simply a film additive onto whatever surface you have. Particularly important, actually, would be to enable these technologies for the developing world, because after all, if I'm looking at 1 billion people who have no access to grid electricity and want to electrify their village, they need a source of scalable local energy production, and solar is an obvious choice for that. But for the solar cell to reach their village, it needs to come on someone's back, as there is no paved road to drive a car on to bring the technology into the village. Result of it is that efficiency, although a very valuable metric, is not as valuable as reducing the weight of the solar cell. If I can give you more power per weight, I'll be able to carry more power on my back as I take 20 kilos of solar cell from a distribution center into my remote village. That is a key advancement that we think can dramatically benefit the world. Here's a picture of one of those paper-thin solar cells. This case attached to electrodes, shine some light on it, and you can power a little electronic device from the electricity generated by that piece of paper. Now, it is a piece of paper, and you can treat it as such, so you can pass it through a laser printer if you wish. You can print right on top of the solar cell, and let's see, does it still work? It still works, because these nanostructured materials are extremely robust. They're so thin that mechanical stresses that they experience do not affect them. A typical cell like silicon one would get cracked in a process of being rolled on the rollers of the laser printer. But these cells don't even notice that they're being bent. They're so short, they're so thin that bending doesn't introduce any additional thin film stresses onto them. You can even remove the paper. And this is an example of an extremely light cell, one that was made on a 1 micron thick polymer substrate. We grew the polymer substrate first, and then we grew our solar cell on top of that. The entire structure is about 2.5 microns thick, if you include the encapsulation layer on top. And it's light enough that you can rest it on a soap bubble. The soap bubble, hence, demonstrates to you just the power of this technology. This is 6 watts per gram of a solar cell, 6 kilowatts per kilogram. And in this particular version, we are not even using the most efficient solar cells we have. We should still be able to improve that number by a factor of 3, maybe even 5, compared to where it is now. So opportunities are vast in deploying new type of solar cells out there. And let me show you one more version that further makes solar technology imperceptible. This is imperceptibly light, nearly weightless. Let me make it nearly imperceptibly, visibly nearly imperceptible. Through the use of nanostructured materials, we can make solar cells that appear like they are a piece of glass. You can look through them. This is a version of one of those, and the series of cells that are on this particular piece of glass generate 106 volts of open circuit voltage. The way the cells are designed is to use nanomaterials that do not absorb visible light, hence your eye can see through the cell, but do absorb infrared and ultraviolet light. And so here's an example of one of those pieces of glass, a little more advanced version of it. Let's attach electrodes to that piece of glass, and let's see if you can power a motor using light, infrared light that's present in the room. And the answer is yes, you can. This technology has been scaled by another little startup from MIT, Ubiquitous Energy. Notice they're blocking the light and the energy stops because you're not absorbing the infrared. Let the infrared light shine again and the motor starts again. Ubiquitous Energy is scaling this technology to the window size so that you can have indeed this as windows in your offices and in your buildings. The largest versions of these that they can make at this point are about 0.5 meter in a larger dimension. And the only thing stopping them is actually funding to build the factory, to be able to enable us to build larger opportunities. I mentioned that these are transparent, and hence you can have them on your glasses and generate a few milliwatts of power to run a Bluetooth radio in your ear. Or you can go ahead and put them on a Kindle, and as a result, have an electronic reader that never needs to be recharged again, because the room light in a course of 5 days or the sunlight in a course of half an hour is all the energy you need to recharge fully the battery behind the Kindle. Of course, the opportunity is to cover a skyscraper with such solar cells. Opportunity that will give you vast amounts of new surface area that right now are not used for anything else except for us to look through the window. Well, why not make an electrically active look through the window? Because in the morning, when the sun is in the east, and in the evening, when the sun is in the west, the large surface areas of buildings are amazingly large surface solar collectors that could indeed be utilized to generate electricity. I gave you many examples. I gave you many examples that could be utilized as opportunities to make the nanoscale transform the world. There are many, many, many more that MIT is pursuing. Indeed, every day at MIT, there is yet another, if not a couple of new nanotechnology stories published in our MIT News. If you follow MIT News, you recognize exactly how present nanotechnology is in every discovery that we are pushing forward. The opportunity for the world that we live in is indeed to embrace this new age we are stepping into, the age of nano, the age of nanotechnology, the nano age, as I think of it. And in that age, the discoveries will be built to build a better world we all expect. Thank you so much for your attention. It's been a true pleasure to share this with you. And I hope when the present pandemic ends, you find your way to visit us at MIT. Let me know. I'll be delighted to meet with you and show you around. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Bueno, hemos llegado al final de nuestra jornada organizada junto con el MIT sobre el poder de la nanotecnología. Estoy seguro que esta jornada y las intervenciones de los profesores Palacios, del Álamo y Bulovic han sido del más alto interés. En cualquier caso, nos honramos por presentar este tipo de iniciativas y este tipo de conocimientos a la sociedad española, lo cual nos hace valorar aún más, como decía en mi intervención de inauguración, nuestra colaboración con el MIT, que es nuestro deseo que siga en el tiempo, por lo menos hasta que estemos aquí todos. Nada más, muchísimas gracias a todos y hasta el año que viene.
Gracias a vosotros.